Hello and warm welcome to the Cloud Computing Masterclass. I think I'm Nebuta Ismail and I'll be taking you throughout the course. Now, we are already at some milestone ahead, like introduction to cloud computing, what cloud computing models. We have things like software as a service, infrastructure as a service, platform as a service. So all of those we've seen that. So today we are getting into AWS. So AWS Amazon Web Services. Now this is not the most basic video. Perhaps we are starting with S3. Amazon S3. S3 is a simple storage service. So we are going to be looking at some advanced and technical aspects about it from beginning. So with this course, with this, I believe you are going to know everything you need to know about Amazon S3. Now to some extent we have what we call simple storage service in AWS. Now storage could be any other storage, like for example, we have hard drives, we have all of these different content types. When we go to platforms like Google, we have things like Firebase storage. So this one could be almost in that same architecture, but this one is provided by AWS. Yes, so now AWS now grants us permission. Perhaps if you are using the platform, if you are using the AWS console, you can be able to use their storage services. Perhaps you pay for it while it is being used, so you only get to pay for what you use. That's a cloud computing aspect. So AWS is very good for storage. One of the key aspects about AWS, for example, we have scalability, durability and availability, and security, data management. Now what is AWS S3? Amazon S3 is an object storage service offered by Amazon Web Services that provides scalable storage for various types of data. Now it's an object storage service. Now when we talk about it, refers to AWS refers to, let's say, any content that you want to upload online, right? It calls it an object, because if we want to give it a predefined name, let's say an image, whatever we want to give it, if we uniquely identify it or specifically give it, then definitely means we limit it. So it collects everything in the form of an object, and it has appropriate mechanisms to be able to decode any of those. So AWS is an object storage service. It's a service, remember, offered by Amazon Web Services that provides scalable storage for various types of data. Now, key factors, we have scalability. Now, we said something, it's storage, it's basically powered by the cloud. So what that means is it's not like hard drives that you buy a hard drive which has fixed space and size. No, it's not like this storage device. It is scalable, so depending on your usability, depending on how much you want, you can always expand it. For example, let's say if you are hosting a website via if you are hosting your website via your S3 bucket, perhaps as the website increases, perhaps maybe the website content is increasing, you can always want to expand it. Yes, this is mostly for static websites. You don't go and try hosting websites here. Okay, now we have durability and availability. S3 is designed to provide 99.9% of durability and 99.99 availability for objects. Yeah, this is because of since they are cloud service, they basically have data centers in different locations. So when it comes to durability and availability, information is always available. You will hardly, I don't know, that's why I said 99.9, you hardly hear of a case whereby data has been lost. The reason is because we have multiple duplication of this data across different availability regions, as we call it, within a particular region. Yes, within a particular region we have availability zones, rather. Yes, availability zones. So one single set of data could be backed up many times, so there is always a sense of durability. Also, we have factors like security. S3 offers various security features like encryption, access control, and bucket policies to protect data. Now, if you are actually granted, remember, most of the data that comes to S3, S3 is a public service, so you can basically use it as long as you have access to AWS. AWS. But now, you, in order to actually protect data, for example, let's say you upload content to your bucket, or let's say to your storage, since we have not gone into bucket, since when you upload content into your storage, now encryption entails now securing this data, securing transmission. Yes, so encryption, you secure, protect data transmission, such that, for example, you need to always maintain data integrity. Yes, so when you secure and encrypt data, you actually provide a shim of protection such that you can, most of the times it's done from end to end, so you encrypt it. So AWS has those possibilities. We have access control. You can be able to control who has access. We have bucket policies to protect data. For example, not all users can use a particular data set. All of those things, you can always do them. We have data management. S3 allows you to manage your data through lifecycle policies, versioning, and cross-region replication. Lifecycle policies. S3, we have S3. S3 has what we call classes. I think we are going to see them. S3 has what we call classes. So these are different, let's say, different levels of their storage. So what that means is you can always let's say navigate through them. When we talk about life cycles, for example, it can move within this cycle in order to, let's say, save you cost. There are data which are mostly frequently accessed, there are data which are not mostly frequently accessed, things like that. So we are going to see that in a bit. Versioning, it also helps us in versioning. For example, let's say you upload data online to your bucket, and the next day you mistakenly upload another data again, and before you want to realize, your data has been lost. So S3, it gives us the opportunity for versioning, such that whenever you update a bucket, or you update yes, you update a bucket, what happens is it creates a new version of it. So it does not actually just delete it. It creates a new version, and you can always roll back. You can always be able to access your previous version, so it makes it very good. Yes, so now let's look at certain core concepts. We have buckets. So S3, what are buckets? Now a bucket is a container for objects stored in S3. It is similar to a directory or folder in a file system. So as you've seen, when you have a file system, perhaps I'm running on Windows. If you have a file system like this, so this one now could be an S3 storage, like for example this is a hard drive. So perhaps, let's say, if I open here, you can create folders. That's what now buckets are. They're like folders. Yes, so a storage bucket is a container for objects. So inside of the folders you can store whatever you want. So what they are basically doing, they are providing us access to these resources via the cloud. So that's the only thing which could be really different. Bucket naming, bucket names must be globally unique and follow DNS naming conventions. Very important. Bucket names must be globally unique. Now, whenever you're using certain buckets, let's say for example to provide data, in order to access this data, the first thing is they must always provide a unique bucket name. Why? So that there should be no duplication of it. Yes, so that your bucket can be uniquely identified by people. For example, let's say if you're hosting a website and all of the website data is in a particular bucket. So what happens? That bucket directory could always be let's say an identifier. So provided you configure the DNS domain name system, domain name server, so provided you configure that enough, you can actually attribute a domain name to that particular bucket and it's made accessible. Yes, so it must always be unique. So no two buckets can be unique. Access control, buckets can be configured with access control policies to manage who can access the data. So very important. We have our objects. Now objects are the fundamental entities stored in S3. As you've seen here, they consist of data, metadata, key, which are key value pairs, and a unique identifier. Now we'll talk about key value pairs. The data you store on, let's say, every object comes in a form of they don't just come by default. They come in the form of what we call a map. They come in form of what they call a map. For example, the map could be a JSON document. Let me say, for example, txt. If we talk about a map, it could be of this form. So that's how it is. So we'll talk about key value pairs. So you can see here they say name. So you can see here they say name. We have name. Maybe you put it bucket one, or let's say object one, or let's say pick one dot jpeg. So we have maybe another thing. Maybe we have extension, all of those kind of things. So whenever you want to upload a file, let's say from your own file system, there's always metadata credited to it. Yes, the file size and all of those things. Yes, so it always keeps that. So this is what we call the key value pair notation. So this is a key name and it has a value. This particular key cannot be replicated along throughout this map. Yes, so that's how objects are stored. So you have a unique key to identify identify within a bucket. So every object, okay, as you have seen here, it always has a unique field here, for example, to identify it within that particular object. Most of the times could be generated by default by the system, depends on the programming. Now we have object metadata. Okay, this is additional information that comes along. So for example, I was talking about key value pairs. You may have content type, they put it there, creation date, custom tags, all of those things. So we have regions and availability zones. Amazon S3 is globally distributed and has multiple regions worldwide, each comprising multiple availability zones. Yes, AZS availability zones. Now what does this mean? In order for you to actually use AWS, since it's a cloud infrastructure, it is not centralized in one location, it is distributed globally. So they are what we call regions. They are what we call regions. Regions basically are these areas or parts of the globe where we actually have their data centers present. Yes, where we have their data centers present. For example, let's say you're in Virginia. We see that a lot. You're in Virginia, you have a data center there provided. Let's say you're in places, let me say Italy, all of those things. So you also have data centers there, so you can always connect. And within these regions we have what we call availability zones. Availability zones now are let's say they are within a region, and also, for example, all of them can be containing a single or let's all of them can be functioning as one. Yes, so they are within a single zone and they can be functioning as one. For example, whenever you upload data to, let's say, a one availability zone, it can be uploaded to all of them. So what is doing is, this is to provide let's say to some level what we call reliability of information and consistency. So what that means is there are very slim possibilities of you losing data. For example, if you want to access this particular server, it's not available, automatically your system can switch to another availability zone. Yes, so it's very important. So that's why whenever you upload data, it doesn't just upload on one cloud server at a time. The reason is because maybe it could be lost due to something, so it can be uploaded automatically throughout these availability zones within a, okay, this is it. We have durability and availability. S3 automatically replicates data across multiple availability zones within a region to ensure durability and availability. We have data management and advanced features. Okay, so let's look at uploading and downloading objects. Now, uploading objects can be uploaded to S3 using AWS Management Console, which is actually the official website. We have which is if you go to aws.amazon.com, you see you see their website there, that you see their console. We also have SDK, software development kits. So what that means is you can actually embed it into, let's say you can get the SDK and you actually use their APIs in order to actually do your work. So SDK stands for software development kit. Then we have API, application programming interface. For example, if you want to use the S3 bucket, you can work with it via the API. So what this means is, if you are using the API, actually you can be able to connect to the service by making RESTful API calls. So that is defined by them. So we also have so this particular concept is very important. For example, let's say you are building an application and you need storage, right? You may not want to use SQL let's say MySQL on your local server and all of those things. So what you can do is you can simply connect to S3, where you can be able to save your bucket. Let's say for example a website that people call, maybe you download content and upload content, things like Mega Drive. Yes, they may have these buckets like this, whereby you can be able to access the data. Maybe you upload there, making your API calls and everything. So data downloading can be also made available. Yes, so you can use the AWS command line interface. We have SDK, so depending on what you want. Command line interface simply means for example you have CMD, so you can be able to use CMD, configure AWS clip for that, so you can be able to make always the calls and you download content directly. We have multi-path upload. Large objects can be uploaded in parts to optimize performance and handle network interruptions. We have versioning, very important. I spoke about it. So S3 supports versioning, which allows you to preserve, retrieve and restore every version of an object in a bucket. Very important. Without versioning you could lose data, so it creates these multiple versions. You can always roll back. Maybe you did some specific change 2 years ago and maybe you want to view it, you can view it back. You can always restore certain portions of it. Very important. All of this immediately on the console. You can always have access to all of them. Yes, so it's just about having the knowledge about everything, all of them. For example, if you open the AWS console, all of this, the data, in fact what I'm talking about now, you can actually see it with a beautiful GUI. So you just need to understand what it's all about. Yes. So benefits and use cases. Versioning helps protect against accidental deletion and overwrite of objects and enables rollbacks. Yes. So I've spoken about that. We have life cycle policies with versioning. So life cycle policies can be combined with versioning to automatically transition or delete object versions. Okay, so now let's look at what is life cycle transitioning. What is life cycle transitioning, as I said here, or life cycle policies rather. Life cycle policies. Now, as I said earlier, you have data, you have uploaded it. Let's say you have a certain application that is a database, right? You constantly need data from there, and you just notice that, let's say you are okay, let's say for example a school has data every year. The school database keeps on increasing and everything, and you get to notice that as years goes by, the data from the previous year become less relevant as compared to that of that present year. So what happens, this your S3, in order to maximize cost, what they do is they actually provide you with what we call life cycles, such that you can be able to move your content to a different storage class. Yes, such that these storage classes now have a way of now let's say reducing access and certain other things. For example, we have things like S3 standard, we have S3 standard IA, we have S3 Glacier, we have S3 Glacier IA and all of those. So when we talk about S3 standard here, this is where mostly frequently data are stored. For example, the day-to-day management of a business. Let's say for example, as I spoke about a school, for that particular year, people are accessing the data, all of those things. Yes, it is actually being used, so you must save it in a location which is active, and this one costs a lot. Yes, so whenever you access the data, they have expenditures. But when you send it to platforms like to areas like Glacier now stores data that has been achieved, that maybe could be used only once in a year, 2 times in a year, all of those things. Yes, so it's actually very important. So why, as you can set up life cycle policies such that maybe as time goes on, there are certain data that you believe that along the life cycle of this particular as long as the data is present there, it becomes less relevant. So what happens, you can now set up these policies such that maybe as time goes on, you don't have to automatically maybe go and save it in that location automatically. It can always do that for you. You can now change the life cycle. To some extent, you may now sit in a very deep now Glacier, whereby it's not accessed. Yes, maybe just once in a while. And one thing that you need to understand is this helps to reduce costs. Yes, so if you're actually working as an AWS professional, you should actually be able to set up your life cycles. Now, lifecycle policies automate the transition and expiration of objects based on predefined rules. Okay, so um, transition and expiration. So you can always expire. So you set the one they expire and everything. So this one is quite visible. Expiration actions. Objects can be configured to expire and deleted after a specific duration. Very important to understand. Now we have cross-region replication. Yes, so cross-region replication enables automatic replication of objects across different AWS regions. We spoke about AWS, the availability zones, about replication of data on all availability zones, right? So also there's also cross-region replication. So cross-region replication enables automatic replication of objects across different AWS regions. So this is only to provide a layer of security. Yes, so it's very important. We have things like big data and all of those. Now, benefits and use cases. It provides data redundancy, disaster recovery, reduce latency for users in different geographic regions. For example, your data center is in, let's say for example, you are in Cameroon and you are using data from a specific region, AWS region, which is found in the US. There's what we call latency. Now, in order to access that data, you need to consume resources. For example, internet, network, all of those things. Yes, there's some time. And to applications, for example, websites, which host, you get to know that this particular thing could be a factor that is a call for concern. Yes, so what they do is, since they have this versioning this region replication stuff, so you can always have now these regions. You can always have this let's say regions replicate data such that, if depending on where you are, they can always provide you data that is closest to you, so that you will not have to lose a lot of resources to access the data. The uptime and all of those things become stable. We have replication configuration. You can define replication rules at the bucket level to specify the destination, region, and storage class for replicated objects. I think when we'll be doing practicals, we'll look at this. We have event notifications. Very important. Now, S3 can generate events. We have object creation deletion that can trigger notifications and consumed by other AWS services. Now, if you are running a website, let's say for example, users can be able to create their account, and you want to alert maybe the users that hello, your new account has been created. How do you do? Immediately a new object is added. Let's say for example, their profile pictures or any of their information. Yes, let's say for example, upload content. You maybe want to send a message that, okay, your content has been uploaded successfully, maybe to your email. It enables notification, and this notification now can be used by other AWS services. For example, we have things like AWS Lambda, which is serverless computing. So you can always configure it such that maybe whenever an action occurs, a notification is triggered, and other AWS services can use it and maybe respond to it depending on what you let's say program them to do. We have S3 event types. Events can can be based on bucket level operations or object level operations, and they can be filtered based on prefixes and or suffixes. Yes, so S3 event types. No, so all of the different events, for example, we spoke about object creation, deletion. So there are different sets of events that you can do. So let's say your S3 basically has a way of categorizing the events. So always have their prefixes, suffixes, depending on what level. So we have bucket level operations that occur within a specific bucket. Let's say for example, if you add a new document to the bucket, something happens. Also we have object level operations that may occur inside of an object. Let's say for example, if you have a Word document that is that is in your cloud bucket, right, in your S3 bucket. So what happens if maybe perhaps you access this particular data and update it? Yes, so let's say maybe you open it, the word file, you update the content of it. So what happens? You can always trigger notifications. We have integration with AWS Lambda. Okay, I've spoken about that. AWS Lambda is serverless computing. So what that means, you simply write a set of functions. It's like code. Yes, you simply write a set of functions programming such that whenever a specific notification or event is triggered, it can always respond to it. It can always respond to it. We have inventory reports. S3 can generate inventory reports that provide a list of objects and their metadata in a bucket. Yeah, it's very important. So if you want to access your data, you do not need to go and start looking for them one by one. S3 basically uses what we call inventory reports, where they can actually just provide you with all what is inside of your bucket, and they give you its metadata. Metadata refers to the additional content that could be found inside of that particular, all of the objects. For example, when we talk about the different objects, their data, how, for example, I showed you about a map, how it is being stored. Yes, so that's how you can get it. So inventory reports are very important. It helps for reporting. Yeah, helps for reporting. Now we have report generation and scheduling. Okay, that's the same thing. Yes, you can be able to generate the reports, inventory reports, maybe schedule it. You can schedule that maybe after 2 years generate a report. Maybe you want to email it as an invoice to someone. You can always program them to do anything. You have data analysis and compliance. Inventory reports facilitate data analysis, compliance audits, and data governance. Yes. So we have security and access control. Security and access control. Now we have access control list. Yes, this is a very important aspect. We have access control lists are used to manage access to S3 buckets and objects. So in order to work with access control lists, so basically we have certain permissions that you can grant to users. Let's say, for example, you create a bucket. You can set it to be public such that everyone maybe having access to that particular repository, or let's say the link directory can be able to have access to it. Sometimes you can restrict specific users, or maybe internally within your AWS. So all of these factors are controlled using access, the access control list. So not just that. So when we talk about permission levels, they define permissions for individuals or users to access the data, maybe from your bucket, from your object, so you can always protect that. Yes, for example, let's say if you have a website, it's a specific object that you don't want anybody to be able to have access to, you can always control that. We have bucket policies. Bucket policies. What are bucket policies? Bucket policies are JSON based policies that apply permissions to a bucket and its objects. So what that means is, whenever you have a bucket, you can always set these policies. So the policies now come as a JSON based policy. JSON is JSON is a file format which is of JavaScript type, JavaScript object. Now when you have these JSON documents, they are written in the form of policies, such that they have a specific format. So when you are dealing with these JSON documents, you can now be able to specify the policies, who can have access to these, different users, how they have access to the data of the objects, and all of those things. You can always specify them. So that's why we talk about policies. So to some extent, these policies are very important. Remember, we are speaking about two types of policies. Now we have fine-grained access control. Okay, that's for policies. Yes, for access control we have policy conditions. Now you can use conditions in bucket policies to further refine access control based on factors like IP address, time, or request headers. For example, there's an aspect called multi-factor authentication in AWS when it comes to user access yes, and user access management and identification. So that's AWS IAM, if I'm not mistaken. Now whenever someone wants to access your data, you can always now, or let's say access data from a specific bucket, you can always set policy conditions. Maybe if you say that only those who are from this from this specific IP, those who are from IP regions which are of this format, those who have maybe those who are sending requests after 12 p.m., those who are accessing the data that have multi-factor authentication. So there are so many conditions that you can set. So this is basically to provide access control. Now we have IAM, AWS IAM. So this is just how it integrates with S3. So IAM roles and policies. IAM provides centralized access control management for AWS services, including S3. So IAM simply stands for access control. Yes, access control and identification management, right? So what this means is it provides you a set of rules. For example, you have roles and policies that enable access. For example, it defines your access to data. So maybe you are restricted, some people are restricted to this, you are not restricted to this. So it also provides now rules, these different rules and policies, that some of them are also to some extent applicable to S3 buckets. For example, you can have a default S3 bucket type, those who can access the data and everything. So all of these sometimes are provided by AWS IAM. So it's used to define the different roles and policies within your cloud. Yes, within your particular cloud infrastructure. We have IAM policies. IAM policies can be used to grant or restrict access to S3 buckets and objects at a fine-grained level. IAM roles with S3. IAM roles can be assumed by AWS services or applications to access S3 resources on behalf of users or entities. Yes, so IAM, as I said, is generally a broad version. So IAM now can be, there are certain rules and there are certain roles and policies which have already been predefined inside of IAM that you can always extend. For example, if you want someone to have full access control over a specific bucket, a specific user, you can always go to the IAM policies. You can see maybe give full access to a specific user and you grant it. So that is mostly applicable when it comes to practicals. So encryption at rest. So S3 supports server-side encryption to protect data at rest using services like AWS Key Management Service. We have KMS. So that's most of practicals. Now, I spoke about encryption of data. So as data is living, it is we hope for data integrity. So basically, we encrypt it, convert it to a specific format which is unreadable until it gets to its intended recipient. Yes, so such that this is to avoid, let's say, interruptions. We have things like SSL certificates that we can issue. Maybe perhaps if you are using a specific domain name, you can always issue those. SSL there stands for Secured Socket Layer. Okay, we also have TLS encryption to secure during the transmission between the clients and S3. So if, for example, I'm accessing a website, I'm the client, I make a request to the website fetches data from the storage and provides to me. So most of these, for example, you want to use services, you see things like HTTPS, Hypertext Transfer Protocol secured. So these people are actually using the SSL certificate there to encrypt their data. We have client-side encryption. S3 supports client-side encryption where data is encrypted before being uploaded to S3 using customer managed keys. Yes, very important. So this is the aspect of end-to-end encryption. So you encrypt the data at the client side. You can also encrypt the data at the server side. Yes, so you can always do this both ways. So you use what we call a customer managed key in order to do that. Now let's look at services that S3 basically can integrate with. So we have the first one, which is the AWS CloudFront. Now CloudFront is a content delivery network. Yes. Now what is a content delivery network? We have different content delivery networks, CDNs. Basically, we have things like Cloudflare. That's one, but this one is the Cloudflare is not provided by AWS. So what they do is they are actually should I call it virtual locations that enable, let's say they bridge the distance between the server and the client. So it's basically some remote location, that data can be stored in that particular location, let's say objects and everything. So let's say if you have a particular website, it collects your data from your bucket, it saves it at this particular location, such that when users want to have access to it, you can easily give it to them without the users actually dealing directly with your storage. Yes, so CloudFront can be used to accelerate content delivery from S3, improve latency, and reduce data transfer cost. Yes, so basically you always have to configure this, but as I've said, it is content delivery network, so it provides a network. So basically you connect this your service to a CloudFront server. So what happens, most your data and everything are in this particular virtual location. Once the user wants to have access to it, it simply delivers it to them without the user actually having to wait for too much time and everything. So it can be used to improve your website speed, or let's say access speed. So we have origin access identity. CloudFront can be managed to use an origin access identity to restrict bucket access only to CloudFront. So as said, we have origin access identity. Now, origin access identity, you can now use it to restrict, let's say, restrict the access right to CloudFront. Perhaps maybe you want to give a certain bucket, you can now restrict it that okay, this particular bucket is let's say is communicating with this particular CloudFront service. So it's basically just to provide that connection. So you always see that this is practically, we are going to see more about it detailedly. We have AWS Lambda. So as I said, it's a serverless compute service provided by AWS. Very important, very important. So you basically have to deal with events based on triggers. Yes, so you can, Lambda functions can be triggered by events in S3 such as object creation, deletion. So immediately an object is created, you can stimulate a specific function to operate. We also have pipelines, yes, processing pipelines. S3 events can be used to create event-driven data processing pipelines where Lambda functions perform custom operations on objects in real time. We'll talk about pipelines. For example, let's say you have your application which is running, right? So you can set it such a way that as long as this application is running, for example, whenever a new user creates an account, it should stimulate a Lambda function that creates an account for the user in the database. So what's happening is you have actually now used pipeline, so you provide that real-time connection. Between, let's say, your AWS to maybe wherever you want to use it. So this could be done using the command line. So this is the pipeline actually. So you can always set up those protocols. So that's AWS Lambda. So this is how it can actually connect. We have AWS Antenna, Amazon Antenna rather, yes. Now Amazon Antenna is an interactive query service that enables analysis of data stored in S3 using standard SQL queries. For example, if you have you are using a command line, you are using the SDK in any way. For example, let's say you are providing people access to data from a website, you can always make them to be able to see their data. You can use Amazon Antenna. You provide SQL queries that such that the users can be able to maybe interact directly with their data, right? So you can be able to view the data stored in an S3 using standard SQL queries. SQL is structured query language, so you can always perform SQL operations in order to or let's say analyze this data, get more information about it, all of those things. So data analysis with Antenna can be used to query and analyze data directly from S3 without the need for data movement or transformation. So it's a pipeline directly. So we have AWS Glue. AWS Glue is a fully managed extract, transform, and load ETL service that for data preparation and integration. Now Glue can be used to perform data transformations on data stored in S3, making it suitable for downstream analytics or data processing. Remember what I said, data transformation. So what that means is you can be able to transform the data, you can be able to extract the data, so you can do perform processes, let's say act on the data that is actually found in your bucket, right? So you can maybe be able to modify it, transform it in other forms. So this is what we call about data transformation. So you can actually use AWS Glue to do that because it's directly connected. We have best practices. Use appropriate buckets and object naming conventions. Implement security best practices like encryption and access control. Yes, we have optimize data transfer and performance with multi-path uploads, parallelism, and CloudFront integration. I never spoke about multi-path. If you want to upload a very large file, you do not need to just upload it. Sometimes maybe network can break and certain things happen. So multi-path uploads allow you to be able to upload very large file sizes. You actually could split it in some way in order to upload it efficiently. Now, parallelism and CloudFront integration. Parallelism, maybe two objects can be uploaded at the same time. Monitor S3 traffics and engage and enable logging for auditing troubleshooting purposes. We'll talk about logging. Logging is the ability for you to be able to collect maybe different feedbacks given to you maybe by the service. For example, if a certain user have access, maybe you log it that this user has had access. If somebody deletes an object, you log it that the object deleted, all of those things. So logs are basically just a piece of information that is stored based on the user interactions with the particular service. Performance optimization techniques. Effective use of caching mechanisms with CloudFront and S3. So I also forgot to tell you, CloudFront is a content delivery network. It's used basically most of the time for caching. So it actually stores frequently accessed data. Yes. So data that you could want to use, you do not need to just let's say connect directly to the server, the S3 storage. You can integrate from CloudFront. Now we have utilizing S3 transfer acceleration to optimize upload and download speeds. Fine-tuning performance by choosing the appropriate storage class and configuring performance enhancing settings. So these are operations that can be performed inside of S3. We have cost optimization strategies. Now, selecting the right storage class based on data access patterns and cost requirements, very important. I spoke to you about storage classes. We have S3 standard, we have standard IA, which is inaccessible. We have Glacier. We have S3 Glacier for achieved. We have also another form of Glacier. And now we also have utilizing lifecycle policies to transition objects to lower cost storage classes or achieve data to Glacier. Very important, very important. So basically what that means is you're using the lifecycle policies as we have seen to transition this data. Analyzing and optimizing data transfer costs by leveraging CloudFront and data transfer acceleration. So I think that will be all for the theoretical aspect of AWS S3. So I think for now you know everything you need to know about S3. So we only have to do now practicals, maybe a live demo of what it's all about. So we'll actually host a static website. So the practical will be hosting a static website via our S3 bucket, so that we can be able to view it. Perhaps we are going to do some demo website. We actually upload it so that we see how we can have access to this.